Some games drown you in endless storylines, others bog you down with tutorials, many just aren't challenging enough. What's the solution to all these problems? Dark Souls. Let's rewind over a decade to 2011. Time really does fly, doesn't it? My friend Jaime said, dude, you gotta play Demon Souls. But I'd heard it was brutally difficult, and at the time, I was more into laid-back experiences like Catherine, while enjoying some, let's call it, relaxing time. Plus, I was still reeling from the ending of Lost and trying to make sense of Inception. My brain didn't need any more puzzles. I didn't want to give myself a self-induced gamer stroke from playing hard games. By the time Dark Souls was released, my curiosity was piqued. So I decided to get my hands on it, eager to see what all the hype was about. It was literally called the Prepare to Die edition. What was I getting myself into? This sounded about as inviting as Charlie Sheen's Twitter feed during his winning phase. I booted up the game, spent way too long creating a character who ended up looking like a cross between Shrek and a potato, and launched into the world of Dark Souls. Almost immediately, it was love at first sight. It was as if Cupid had aimed for two star-crossed lovers but accidentally hit me instead. I fell head over heels for the game's atmosphere and lore. Since then, I've beaten the game about 100 times across multiple systems and re-releases, including the so-called remastered port. Let's be honest, it wasn't all that remastered. Aside from 60 FPS and maybe slightly better-looking bonfires, it looked pretty much the same to me. Yeah, they called it remastered, but it was more like we slapped a new label on it and called it a day. Kind of like when Hollywood decided to reboot Spider-Man just 5 years after the last movie. But hey, it did add one thing that made it worth the price of admission: dedicated servers. Before the remaster, I used to play in jolly co-op with my wife and friends. It was glorious fun, until we got invaded by a red phantom who purposely kept his level low but had maxed out gear and spells. It created an uneven and unfair battle, more like an extermination. It was as if the Terminator had just walked into the room asking for Sarah Connor. One minute we're peacefully slaying undead together, the next we're getting curb-stomped by some PvP tryhard who probably laughs maniacally every time he ruins someone's day. Thanks, bud. Aside from these unwelcome home invasions, another issue during the original release was the shoddy peer-to-peer networking for online play. It worked well about half the time. When it didn't, you'd find yourself rebooting the system, restarting the router, and before long, you and your friends were contemplating an Office Space-style demolition of your Xbox 360s with baseball bats. It was like trying to connect to Xbox Live using 2 tin cans and a string. You'd spend more time troubleshooting than actually playing. I was one connection lost message away from throwing my Xbox 360 into the red ring of death on purpose. But when you finally managed to join your friends, it was some of the most fun you could have in gaming. We'd leapfrog our way through the game, taking turns beating each other's bosses. Co-op ends after you defeat the boss, but so does the threat of those red phantom Terminators seeking blood. It was like assembling the Avengers, only to disband right after defeating Loki. Sure, the party was over, but at least we saved the world. Or, you know, got past Blighttown's frame rate drops that made it look like flipbook animation. We eventually beat the game, although my friend was stuck in Sen's fortress for what felt like an eternity. But he made it through eventually. Like most fans, what's the best thing to do after you've beaten it? Play it again, but this time in New Game Plus mode. You get to keep your level, your gear, your gonads, and even your strife. Because nothing says fun like signing up for more punishment. It's like finishing Super Meat Boy and then deciding to play I Want to Be the Guy for kicks. I remember playing the Xbox 360 version as a sunbro, assisting a random player whose world was so insanely difficult that I got one-shotted by a rat. Yes, a rat. I sent him a message asking, what the heck was that? He replied, I'm in New Game Plus 17. I'm only level 30. I love Dark Souls. This guy was my hero, purposely limiting himself to make an already tough-as-nails game even tougher. Who does that? That's like going to a chili eating contest and bringing your own ghost peppers because the standard stuff isn't hot enough. This guy was the Chuck Norris of Dark Souls, back when Chuck Norris jokes were still a thing. Inspired by this digital masochist, I too started to challenge myself, eventually beating the game as a level 1 pyromancer. But I never went as far as trying to beat the game using a Guitar Hero controller while dancing on a Dance Dance Revolution map. I'll save that insanity for another lifetime. Seriously, some people were out there beating bosses blindfolded, using bongos or with their feet. Meanwhile, I considered it an achievement just to get past Ornstein and Smuff without hurling my controller like a Wii remote through the TV screen. Multiple sequels and spin-offs have since spawned, and while I enjoyed them, they never quite recaptured my love for the original. There was something magical about it, something hard to put into words. But if I had to sum it up, I'd say what made Dark Souls so great was that it had a soul. Pun totally intended. And no, I'm not just saying that because I spent countless hours collecting them in-game. Dark Souls had that special something. A spark, a je ne sais quoi, that kept me coming back even when it kicked my butt repeatedly.